From Social Prosperity Partners, this is Community Catalysts. Welcome to Community Catalysts, the podcast that examines the qualities of community leadership and the many paths and forms it can take. I'm your host, Matt Lehrman. This episode is underwritten by RELI, the Regional Elected Leaders Initiative, part of the Schar School of Policy and Government at George Mason University. I'm thrilled for this partnership and for the opportunity to explore in depth the innovative and transformative leadership emerging in the public sector across Northern Virginia. Today, I'm honored to welcome Meagan Alderton, who has served as a governing board member for Alexandria City Public Schools in Northern Virginia since 2018 and as board chair from 2021 to 2023. Notably, she is only the second African-American woman in the district's history to hold that position. Beyond her school board role, Meagan also serves as the Director of Education, Innovation, and Improvement at the DC Special Education Cooperative, the Co-op, where the vision is to ensure that all students with disabilities in DC receive inclusive, rigorous education, preparing them for post-secondary success. So, with experience spanning roles as a teacher, parent, program director, adjunct instructor, and school board member, Meagan has graciously agreed to open up about her accomplished but sometimes painful leadership journey, as well as her hard-earned insights into the challenges facing teachers, schools, and the broader education system today. Meagan, I also want to highlight that you are the very first school board member to be a guest on the Community Catalyst podcast. So thank you for being here and welcome.
Well, thank you. I mean, that in itself is an honor. So I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
I'm so grateful to meet you. Meagan, Shakespeare famously said that some are born great, some achieve greatness, and some have greatness thrust upon them. And I think the same can often be said about leadership. For some, leadership comes naturally, while others grow into it or find themselves called to lead in unexpected moments. When did you first recognize that quality in yourself? Was there a particular moment or experience that made you realize that you were destined for a leadership role?
Wow, that's a big question. When did I realize? I'm not sure there was sort of a moment. I think I would say in a lot of ways, if I look at myself, if I look at sort of how I've navigated through life, there probably is definitely a leadership quality that just has been a part of me. I can go back to elementary school. I was student government president. Why? How did that happen? It just was always kind of a natural call for me. I was never afraid to step up to do anything, really. Leadership is definitely, if I'm honest, it's always been a part of me. And the role probably didn't really matter. If it was student government, if it was just like, I'm a teacher and I have great ideas and, school leaders would come to me and say, hey, why don't you share this at a professional development for the school? I was never afraid to sort of step up, to share ideas, give opinions, lead something, anything. So I think I was kind of born this way. I was born this way.
So as you reflect on the early parts of your journey, were there any particular role models or mentors who significantly influenced your development?
Definitely my mother, I think, really my family in general. Always, again, I think I never was fearful of stepping up to do things because I had the support. If I wanted to try something, if I wanted to do something, no one was telling me I couldn't.
If you think back about some of those leadership qualities that you observed or you absorbed early on, what are some of the actual qualities that you got at a young age that still are meaningful to you today?
I am a calm person, and I think that is it has served me. as a leader. And I always admired those leaders who led calmly. And I say that because there are moments in your life, there are moments when you're leading any situation when there's going to be some level of crisis. And when you're in those moments, it pays dividends to be the one who can calmly walk through it. Because if I'm leading and I'm in crisis, everybody around me is going to be in crisis, right? But if I'm leading and I'm calm, I give other people the calm that they need in order for everyone to get through a situation.
Meagan, I want to just go deeper on that one point for a second. What I'm hearing you say is it's not just that you remain calm on the inside. You also understand how to calm a situation, how to calm the people around you to get them to slow down and open up in a moment. Let's fast forward.
Sure.
You made the decision to run for the Alexandria School Board. You were elected in 2018, but let's just back off from that a little bit. What motivated you to take the leap in the first place? Why did you even want to do that?
Oh, I asked myself this today. No. Bottom line for me is I am an educator to my core. And, I actually taught in Alexandria City Public Schools for a while, probably, I'm going to say maybe it was 7 to 8 years that I taught in Alexandria City Public Schools. But when I left ACPS, I left because I ventured into special education leadership in the DC area, in Washington, DC. But I will say there is something very special about Alexandria City Public Schools, and that is once you belong, you kind of always belong. And so even though I was, working in DC, I was always drawn to, I kind of consider Alexandria City Public Schools home when it comes to like the beginnings of my career. I wanted to, I love what I'm doing in DC. I love what I was doing in DC, but I wanted to continue to contribute to my community, based on the skill set and knowledge that I have. I live in Alexandria. My husband has been teaching in Alexandria City Public Schools. I think he's on his 26th year this year. So it really is home for us in a lot of ways. And it really was a way for me to say, if I have a skill set, there is a need. What is a way that I can serve this community? And it really was the most appropriate fit for me.
I'm going to ask you to paint a picture and tell us about the Alexandria school system. You call it a division, right? Not a department, right?
Division, yeah.
Okay, but let me do the numbers. I went to the Alexandria City Public Schools website, so I got the numbers at least. 16,000 students representing more than 119 countries. By the way, I did the calculation. That's almost 62% of the number of countries in the UN, just for the record. They speak 121 languages. The district consists of 18 schools, including 2 middle schools, 2 K through 8 schools, 1 pre-K school, and the internationally recognized Alexandria City High School. So you get elected to the board in 2018. What are the issues? What are the topics? And you're what, one of 9 people on the school board?
One of 9, yes. So, and at that time, I was one of 9, but 5 of us were new, which is a whole other can of worms that maybe, if we get to it, we can talk about it. But 5 of us were new. There were 4 incumbents. And I would say immediately when we hit the ground, probably the biggest issue was the high school. There was pretty much a plan that was already in the works to address high school capacity because the King Street campus, which is housed, the 10th through 12th graders since 2007, I believe, was bursting at the seams. And we had 9th graders at what we called the mini Howard campus. That was the model that had been used for a long time. And, I think people really liked the whole concept of, 9th grade center, where, 9th graders didn't have to immediately sort of filter into this very large high school. But when it came to capacity, the building itself, it was an opportunity because the building itself it needed to be redone. And in that, everyone saw an opportunity that, well, if this building needs to be done, this is also an opportunity to build capacity for our high school, and make that building better, make it bigger, make it more focused with high school ed specs, that kind of thing. So what emerged, though, was the conversation of, well, if we're working on high school, we need another high school. And so that's the real thing that we kind of hit the ground running with, that I think was the biggest issue. And that was, do we have one high school or do we have two?
And was that a contentious issue?
Yes, I would say it was contentious because there was a definitely a segment of the community, and still is, who says basically, if we stay one high school, we're planning to have a 5,000 student high school, which I believe the projection was by 2030. We're already in 2025. At this point, we have 4,600. And, people are like, that's too big. And then there was another segment of the community that was really concerned that if we go to two high schools, then we're going to have to deal with some obvious inequities. And I think people are more concerned about inequalities that would occur. We have, for example, a very robust course offering, which you can do when you have 4,600 students, because you can afford to have more options for students to choose from. If you have a smaller high school, you can't have 460 options, right? If you cut it in half, you're going to be able to have, 200 options or whatever. So there was concern about minimizing access to certain options for kids who normally wouldn't have that option without the setup as we have it now. So there were really two sides to the issue, and I think both sides were pretty vocal.
And Meagan, did you know that was an issue when you were running, or was that something that you inherited as a decision upon getting elected?
I actually, it was one of those things that you knew, but you didn't really know how deep it was. I don't think I knew how deep it was, because really the issues that were at the forefront for me in the election were facilities. Our facilities situation was not good at all in ACPS. And that was a very loud issue, I think, across the division. So facility was like a super hot topic. But where this conversation, I think you didn't really get the full understanding of it, was because I think the previous board was addressing a high school facility issue. And what it brought up for people was, wait a minute, why are we trying to have a 5,000 kid high school? We need another high school in the city. What are we holding on to this one high school for? But then it also then shifted to a discussion of what happens if we have one high school. We have a history in Alexandria that I think a lot of people know about. I mean, remember the Titans? It's a Disney movie. So there wasn't all, 100% truth, but the premise was very honest, which was the integration process was very difficult in this city. And so people, I think rightfully so, were worried that we haven't done that before. Well, I'm going to take that back. We did that before, and we had to bring the whole city together to this one high school because of the issues that were caused. Granted, it was a different time, but I'm not sure we've truly let go of that because of things that we continue to see. So
you're saying there were echoes or baggage, there were implications of integration from the 1960s, I presume, that still resonated deeply in Alexandria in 2018.
100%. 100%. Which for me was very fascinating, because what was interesting for me was I was coming from, growing up, I grew up in Prince George's County, Maryland. Majority Black community. And so there was no concern about having access to IB programs or, I was French immersion, kindergarten through 10th grade. What was available to everyone. And the majority of the people in the community were Black. So there was no fear or trepidation around not having access to particular educational opportunities because, quite frankly, we were the community. And that was very interesting to me to see how those things play out when you're not in that kind of situation. So, I mean, I don't know if that makes sense, but it was wild for me to start to process that.
It also speaks to the distinction between, and I talked to a lot of elected officials, right? There's a distinction between the politics of campaigning and the responsibilities of governance, right? What's the saying that, you campaign in poetry, but you govern in prose?
100%.
So you're saying you learned once you took the oath of office that all of a sudden it got real, and it wasn't exactly what we had campaigned about.
Yes, and I think I do feel like, and I don't know why, but I was fortunate enough to truly understand that the campaign is one thing, and when you get in office, it's not going to be about your campaign. Like, I totally understood that. So when I campaigned, I really did, I believe, I campaigned on the reality of the issues that were present in the data. My campaign was about student achievement, teacher support, and my campaign, and I did focus on facilities issues as a part of that. So I never had sort of pie in the sky. I was not the person campaigning saying when I get on the school board, everybody's going to have ice cream and cookies, right? I understood that. But what you don't really know is the truth, about the complexities within a community until you get in that seat. And all the baggage that they're bringing that is shaping how a community even has discourse about issues. There's no way to know it. I don't care what anybody says. There's no way to know it until you get in that seat. And you see, I hate to say it, but it's you see how the sausage is made, I guess, or.
So Meagan, you took office. There were some pretty meaty decisions that needed to be made. We can talk more about those meaty decisions if you want, but I'm guessing that before too long, there was all of a sudden this dawning realization that the world was changing due to the COVID pandemic. When did you first know that this COVID thing was going to be significant for the school district as well as for the community and for the world?
This all kind of went down in March, and I felt like at the beginning of April, I knew that it would be a long shot if kids were going to be back in school before the end of the year, just because of the speed at which things were moving.
Well, but that's March, and the end of the school year is what, May or June? Was it even in the realm of possibility that you were thinking it might be a year or more later?
Now, no, I was not thinking a year. I was not thinking a year. We went from thinking, in a couple of weeks, it'll all be fine. We'll have it figured out, to knowing we don't have this figured out at all. We don't know what is happening, and we have to change quickly. We're like, well, hey, let's just get, at the very least, let's get, Chromebooks into every kid's hand, tablets into the little kids' hands, and we can start to set ourselves up to make sure that we're providing an education for these kids while they're at home.
Meagan, is that the imperative that the school board felt right from the beginning that whatever happens, we have to keep educating?
100%. I think, and particularly that board, when that started, that wasn't even a question. And it's so sad because what bothers me the most is that the conversation isn't even, I don't know how many times I've had to say, why are we not talking about these kids' education? Like we're not even talking about like academic achievement anymore. We had another big topic that came up because of COVID and the political scene at the time was like, renaming our high school. T.C. Williams was like a segregationist, but like the amount. Listen, I'm a Black woman. Okay, I feel you. Like, yeah, we don't like racist, but at the time, I was like, the focus on something is like tangible as a name change versus the fact that like we had an achievement gap that was about to get bigger because of this situation that we were in, and the visceral, I mean, nastiness from people are like, you need to change the name now, and if you're not, then, you're not down with the cause. And I'm like, literally, are you kidding? Like, wait a minute, are you talking to me?
Where's your sense of priorities?
No offense, but like, you white lady are telling me I'm not down? Like this is like what is happening now. And listen, I'm Democrat, I'm voting for Kamala, but everybody has to understand the role that I don't care if you're a Democrat, independent, or Republican, everybody is playing a role in this nastiness. And that has to change because I don't want to hear, like I'm at a point, I don't want to hear about who you're voting for. If you're not displaying the qualities that you say you support and if you're displaying the things that you say you're against, you're no better.
Okay, so the part of this that I think probably was not a blur is that within, a year or so after the COVID pandemic, you became the board chair. And that means what? That not only did you inherit all the substantive issues that you got when you were elected, but now you inherited all the politics and the dynamics of the people and all the constituencies and stakeholders. I would like to hear more about that. What can you tell us about the reality of taking the chair role?
Ooh, obviously as a board member, you are participating the whole time. So you do know, I knew the volatility around like, open schools versus not open schools and sort of the things that were playing out there and the different desires of people in the community. What you don't know, and I think you just don't know until you get in that seat, is the power that you are perceived to have once you step into that chair role. And it just changes. Right. The responsibility shifts or the laser focus on you, even though you're one of nine. Right.
You're still one of 9 votes, but now the expectations are there. Does that mean you're expected to drive the agenda?
Yes. And I think that is part of the leadership role. It's, the chair and the vice chair set the agenda, but that's not without input from your peers, right? But the perception is that you have this power that maybe all of your other colleagues don't have, in that you can drive everything. So yeah, it was interesting for me, and to be quite frank, and I think I'll have a moment of honesty here. I felt that my shift into leadership, there was a much different reaction from people than for the previous person, than for the person before me.
What was different?
What was different was I was a Black woman. We now had a Black woman as chair, and we also had a Black superintendent. And I will say, I'm not a fearful person. I am confident in what I say and what I do. I am not the leader who is focused on the loudest people in the room. I listen to everyone, but for me, from an equity standpoint, there cannot be a small number of people who are driving the agenda for everyone else. And I think culturally, and maybe this happens, in a lot of politics, as a politician, I think it's easy to be drawn to or be guiding the conversation based on the people who have access to you, who have traditionally had access to these settings, are able to vocalize and be in your face and say what needs to happen and do what needs to happen. And oftentimes it's worked for those people. That was not me, because I understood that there were a lot of people around who weren't saying anything or that we weren't hearing from. And that for me, we couldn't drive a school division based on the 100 loud voices when there are 17,000, 16,000 families. So I don't know. I do feel it felt different. My shift into the role made things feel really different.
This podcast is sponsored by the Regional Elected Leaders Initiative, RELI, of George Mason University's Schar School of Policy and Government. RELI is dedicated to enhancing regionalism in Northern Virginia, encouraging cross-border intergovernmental collaboration, providing educational programs and networking opportunities, and strengthening the governance skills of Northern Virginia's elected public leaders. Meagan, is it okay if I ask you more questions about this?
Sure, go ahead.
So, look, I'm a middle-aged white male who lives in Scottsdale, Arizona. So my understanding of Alexandria is from afar.
Okay.
But I know a little bit about the community. I used to live in Arlington before I got married, the neighboring city. Here's what I understand about Alexandria. It's a pretty wealthy, fairly well-off community. Mm-hmm. Typically thought of as being somewhat progressive in terms of its politics. It's a vibrant kind of place. We didn't go through your whole CV, but you're highly educated. You got a master's degree. You've been teaching. You've been doing all of this incredible work. So let me just lay it out. You're saying that despite all of that, the politics of identity was a huge obstacle for you as you became the board chair in the school district in Alexandria?
I believe so. And I think you just said one key thing. If you just went based on my experience in my resume, right? And the things that I have done, the roles that I have taken, the experience that I have in the realm of education. This is not me tooting my own horn in any way, because I don't do that. But in terms of if this were a job that I had applied for, in terms of that, I would think that there would be a lot more trust in my capabilities of being in that role. I will say my life experience is, despite your qualifications, despite all the things that traditionally say you should be 100% okay to take on a position or do a thing, the experience for me, and I think for a lot of Black women that I know, is everybody's going to question you no matter what. There's always going to be a question about your capability of leading. And I felt it. And I think if you talk to a lot of Black women who are leading or in positions of leading, I think you could talk to Black men. You are questioned. Your integrity is questioned. Your true capabilities are questioned. And yes, this is a progressive city. Yeah, everybody votes. Majority of people here vote Democrat. That, for me, by no means is proof that we have fully overcome the politics. I guess we call it the politics of identity, the racial issues that are so deep in our society. And I will say this: we have to remember that. And listen, I love Alexandria. I do. It's a beautiful place. It's a wonderful city. But we have to remember that the auction block started here on Duke Street. And I think it's very difficult completely pull all of what that means out of how a community grows and develops. We have to keep that in our minds because, quite frankly, if we look at our data, it's still happening in our schools. How can we be such a wealthy locality with all the resources that we have, and we still have these just gaps in who has access to what, who's achieving what? Something is not connecting. So, it's not to say that people are bad, but I think if we don't continue to think deeply about how a community or how a country has evolved in the ways that that continues to impact how we think about people or what we think people can do, what we think our children are able to do, it's going to continue to be a problem.
When we talk about the politics of identity, it sounds like what you're saying is this wasn't about the substantive question of whether we should have one high school or two. And it wasn't about all the substantive questions about how we respond to the COVID pandemic and all the decisions and implications from there. You're saying at a whole different level, the politics of identity are their own agenda and they present their own obstacles and they are as tangible as any other issues that are going on. Am I hearing you right?
I think so. And I hesitate even to say like the politics of identity because, at the end of the day, I do feel like people's identity is a big part of who they are. But there are things that have been created around those identities that people don't have control over, right? That have just been created by whatever systems that we've created within a society. But going back to your point about, I'll say one thing that I said in the one or two high school discussion, I explicitly said on the dais, I said, I am hearing a lot about the need to have this one high school as a way to keep our community together, to avoid racism, to avoid systemic racist things happening. And I explicitly said, if we have to do in 2019, if we have to have one high school for the same reason in 2019 as we had to have in 1967, we have a deeper problem, folks. I explicitly said that. We have a much deeper problem. And we need to remember that if we are trying to build things in order to avoid, things that, yes, are harmful, there's something deeper that we need to be dealing with in our community. One high school, two high schools, because the inequities are still there. They're still rampant. At the core of all these issues, I can tell you with the COVID, issue, it was really kind of the same discussion in the sense that, we were looking at data around who wanted to come back to school and who didn't. And we had to ask ourselves, okay, what is it that's happening for these families who are afraid to come back to school in person? And they did look a certain way. I had to admit it, so I don't know. I could go on and on, but go ahead.
Meagan, in preparing for today, you shared a powerful sentiment with me. You said, and I'm going to quote here, you have to operate from a place of integrity, not popularity. Mm-hmm. And you also said that you were okay with being unpopular. And so it sounds like, you faced, some pretty significant challenges. I'm just want to ask, are there certain lessons that you take from that, things that you would share with other people who are either existing or emerging leaders in their own communities?
Yes, I would say, I think one, at the end of the day, you have to sleep at night. At the end of the day, you have to live with yourself because when all of this is gone, you're left with you. You're not going to be in the spotlight forever. Maybe you will, probably not. And so are you going to be able to walk away saying you did the best that you could do for the people who needed you the most? Are you going to walk away feeling like you have the respect from the right people? That means, I think we also have to remember that, oftentimes leaders, even just from a any leadership perspective. You're running a school division, you're running a company. Leadership can sometimes be unpopular. If you're doing things just to be liked, you might not be getting anything done, right? You might not be accomplishing anything. And often I think from a governance perspective, everybody doesn't have the information that you have. They just don't. They can't. It's literally almost impossible. And so when you are elected, I do think when I elect people, I'm electing them to do a role because what I'm saying to them is, I trust that with the information that you will receive, you will make the best decisions in the interest of the people you serve.
Meagan, it sounds like what you're saying is that if you operate from a position of integrity, that sometimes painful journey to leadership, that makes it worth it.
I think it does.
Meagan, I have some lightning round questions for you. These are questions that you have to answer in one sentence or less. Are you prepared? Are you willing to do that?
Yeah.
Meagan Alderton, how would you describe your leadership style in just 3 words?
Calm, cool, collected.
And what's the best leadership advice you ever received?
Stay true to yourself.
Meagan, if you could instantly gain any new skill to improve your leadership, what would it be?
I believe that sometimes people are intimidated by me or like my presence. I don't know why, but if there was something I could do to maybe not make that so, that would be good.
What's a small change that could be made in the process of school board governance that could make a big difference?
To me, it's a small change, but I think it's a big change in terms of getting it done. In the case of Alexandria, staggering elections, it really should be a small change. Just got to be brave enough to get it done.
Hey, Meagan, what's something that you do to invest in your own mental health and wellness?
For me, that is actually taking time to be alone. That's really important for me, to have time to just disengage and be with myself and my own thoughts and my own needs. Whatever I want to do, I have to have time to be with myself.
My last lightning round question for you is, we live in divisive times. What gives you hope for the future?
I would say my experience, I think actually attending the Olympics this year in Paris gives me hope for the future. And I say that because I saw how the world could come together in one place and celebrate each other. Know what people's political affiliations were, or what country they were, what type of country they were. It did not matter. And that gives me hope that if we could all just focus on the right things, which is in general, celebrating humanity, being happy for people, whoever they are, whatever state they're in, I think that gives me hope. Like, we can do this.
Meagan Alderton, thank you so much for being with me. Thanks for being so open, for being so generous with your insights. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you. Thanks so much for your time.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me. It was fun.
Once again, my thanks to Meagan Alderton, board member and past chair for the Alexandria City Public Schools in Alexandria, Virginia. And let me say thank you again for this episode's sponsorship by RELI, the Regional Elected Leaders Initiative of the Schar School of Policy and Government at George Mason University. This episode was edited by Nick Living the Dream Tantillo. Our executive producer is John Little. I'm Matt Lehrman of Social Prosperity Partners. Ask me a question, share a comment, or let me know that you have a story to share. You can reach me at 602-688-2724 or matt@socialprosperity.us. I'd love to hear from you. We'll be back soon with another Community Catalyst.